Killer of Rome by Tim Whalen. Chapter 19. As Dan and Mike's car rolled into Santa Ana, the thriving heart of Orange County revealed itself. The city, with its population of 45,000, dwarfed its neighboring communities and offered a tangible example of the rapid growth and development in Southern California since the war. Santa Ana hummed with post-war ambition, its streets bustling while citrus groves clung stubbornly to the outskirts. Older cars and shiny new models jockeyed for position, their chrome bumpers catching the bright afternoon sun. The air was thick with the gritty odor of exhaust and the tantalizing aromas of cooking wafting from the many restaurants lining the main streets. As they parked, Dan surveyed the shops on the street. Mission-style arches framed deep-set windows, their wrought iron grills casting intricate shadows on the whitewashed stucco. Terracotta roof tiles, weathered to rich amber, crowned the buildings. A barber's pole spun lazily outside Manuel's hair salon. Next door, the post office's heavy wooden door stood propped open, welcoming the afternoon breeze. Across the street, craftsman buildings showcased their sturdy wooden beams and solid foundations. The overhanging eaves created pools of shade on the sidewalk below. Thompson's Hardware occupied a corner, its broad display windows filled with gleaming tools and garden equipment. The adjacent Wilson's Pharmacy featured an ornate pressed tin ceiling visible through the storefront. Bingham's department store, where better gifts are bought, was a stark departure from its neighbors. Clean lines of steel and glass stretched skyward, its modernist look a testament to post-war prosperity. The building's smooth concrete exterior, unmarked by ornament or embellishment, made the flowing script of Bingham's appear to float above the entrance. Plate glass windows, unprecedented in their size, offered glimpses of mannequins draped in the latest fashions. The structure stood as a bold declaration of the future, challenging the historical character of downtown Santa Ana. The sidewalks teemed with shoppers, housewives pushing baby carriages, and businessmen in smart suits hurrying to their next appointment. The city's trolley main line had just been retired, a sign of changing times. Now, both bus drivers and motorists used their horns in a traffic conversation that filled the streets. Dan and Mike stepped through the glass doors of Bingham's, and it was as if they had crossed a threshold into the future. The cool, crisp air inside enveloped them, a sharp contrast to the warm, aromatic afternoon they left behind. Before them lay a vast expanse of polished linoleum, so pristine it seemed to ripple like water under the dazzling light of massive chandeliers suspended from the exceptionally high ceiling. The space was immense, yet inviting. Its lofty heights created an atmosphere of limitless possibility. To their left, a rainbow of fabrics unfurled in the clothing section. To their right, an array of radiant appliances promised to revolutionize home life. Straight ahead, the cosmetics counters sparkled like a jeweler's display. It was attended by smartly dressed women with perfect makeup and encouraging smiles. The newness of everything was almost overwhelming. Price tags boasted "just arrived" and latest model on items nobody could have imagined a few years before. The air itself seemed charged with the excitement of progress and the allure of consumption. As they ventured further into this cathedral of commerce, the sounds of the outside world faded, replaced by the muted sounds of people talking, the occasional ding of a cash register, and the squeak of shoes on the spotless floor. This was more than just a store. It was a symbol of the new America, a place where dreams were packaged, priced, and made attainable. This space, with its endless options and bright, clean surfaces, was the very definition of consumer-driven modernity.
Not much like Bishop's Hardware.
Not much.
They wove through the aisles to the lunch counter, where customers perched on stools and sipped sodas under buzzing fluorescent lights. Behind it, a young soda jerk in a crisp white uniform drew Mike's attention. The attendant's cheerful style was evident in the way he worked. His hands moved with finesse as he prepared sodas and sundaes. Josh Nixon, with his boyish face and slight build, didn't look old enough to be working, let alone to have served in the Army 4 years earlier. As Josh looked up from his work, his face spoke of recognition. A broad smile spread across his face as he caught Mike's eye. With a quick word to his coworker, Josh untied his apron and made his way around the counter. He led Dan and Mike out through the back of the store and into the relative privacy of the parking lot. The parking lot was a stark contrast to the bright, busy interior of the department store. Bingham's walls seemed to trap the heat, making the air feel thick and oppressive. The sounds of the city were muffled here, creating an eerie sense of isolation. As Dan was introduced to Josh, the soda jerk's mood shifted subtly, his youthful face taking on a more serious look. He braced himself for questions he sensed were coming. Mike's eyes fixed on Josh as he explained the situation. The young clerk listened cautiously. He was both curious and anxious. When Mike mentioned Dan's role as his former superior in Rome and their current work with the LAPD, Josh's posture stiffened.
What does this have to do with me?
Josh asked, his voice guarded.
We're looking for someone who served in Rome and is now in the LA area. Someone who's been involved in some serious incidents with women.
Josh acknowledged his history.
I served in Rome, sure. But what kind of incidents are we talking about?
Mike was aware of the weight of his next words.
We're investigating a series of murders. Prostitutes.
The color drained from Josh's face. He stood speechless for a moment, his chin dropping to his chest. When he finally looked up, Mike saw a tired young man, burdened by a past misdeed he had thought forgotten, now suddenly exposed.
It was one punch.
His voice cracking.
Just one.
Tell me what happened, Josh.
Josh took a shaky breath.
It was in Rome. I was with a hooker. When I woke up, she was taking my wallet. I grabbed her, and we struggled. And I hit her. Once.
His eyes pleaded for understanding.
I swear, I didn't mean.
His voice broke, hands trembling. Mike listened as his mind tried to reconcile Josh and his story with the savage killing of Maria Albano. This confession didn't match the brutality of the murders they were investigating, but it was still a significant revelation.
What happened after that, Josh?
Josh ran a hand through his hair.
The Carabinieri came. I was asked a lot of questions, but nothing came of it. I thought it was over. I thought it was over.
Mike nodded.
I appreciate you telling us this, Josh. It's important information, but we need to be clear. The cases we're looking into are much more severe. 3 women have been killed.
Josh's eyes widened in horror.
Killed? I couldn't.
As Josh stumbled over his words, his innocence appearing more likely, Mike was relieved. The interview continued, with Mike and Dan pressing for more details. As Josh learned more about the murders he was suspected of, his initial panic gave way to relief. Soon thereafter, he led them back into the store and to the staff room, where several clipboards hung on the wall. The work schedules for the lunch counter were on one. They were neatly arranged, with next month's, October, on top, and the previous month's underneath. Mike pulled out his notebook, his eyes switching between the schedules and his notes. He compared the dates and times of the Los Angeles murders with Josh's work hours. The only sounds in the staff room were 2 clerks having coffee at a small table, and the soft rustle of paper as Mike flipped through his notes. Finally, Mike looked up, a smile spreading across his face. He was satisfied that Josh had been working when 2 of the recent murders happened. The trio traded looks of relief, their earlier concerns now melting away as Josh was in the clear. Later, outside Bingham's, Dan and Mike leaned against the wall, ice cream cones melting in the afternoon sun. The sweet, cold treat was a welcome respite from the heat. Dan also held a coffee. Dan and Mike drove across Santa Ana to their next stop. The car hummed rhythmically as they made their way to the home of Simon True. Dan peered out the passenger window, pointing out the changes he saw that were proof of Santa Ana's growth. After a few quiet minutes, Dan chuckled, the sound breaking through the drone of the engine. Mike turned to him, puzzled.
I was remembering the day we met.
Mike's eyes lit up.
February 2nd, 1944, my first day at the front.
Dan's grin widened.
You didn't have a mark on you. Second lieutenant, right off the boat. Clean as a whistle.
And you?
Mike exclaimed, turning in his seat to face Dan more fully.
Covered in mud. Looked like hell.
Dan shot him a look of disbelief. Mike, catching the objection, was forced to change his description.
Okay, you looked like shit.
He said, his tone honest and tinged with affection. As their laughter subsided, Dan shook his head, still smiling.
After 2 weeks in the mud, we had forgotten what clean looked like. You know, I thought you were going to be just another green officer, in over your head. But you surprised me. You had guts, kid.
What's with this kid? I'm a year younger than you.
Mike countered.
Hey, it's my story.
Dan trumped.
To be fair, a month at Monte Casino could age you. 10 years.
Dan silently acknowledged the truth of Mike's statement. Driving through Santa Ana, the exchange between Dan and Mike took a more thoughtful turn. They had shared much in the war. It bound them together. Dan's eyes remained fixed on the road, but his mind wandered to the many faces of those they had known, those who had paid the ultimate price. Dan's voice was low and contemplative as he spoke of Bobby, Kate's husband, and the dozens of others they had lost. Each name was a reminder of the cruel cost of conflict, a price that seemed to only grow larger with time. He found himself recalling specific moments, a shared laugh, a last few words, a final handshake that made the losses all the more poignant. Mike thought of Marty, confined now to a wheelchair. He didn't know Marty before the war. Occasionally, Dan or Kate would tell stories about the old Marty McDougal that made everyone laugh. And on some days, Mike knew he could see bits and pieces of the person Marty used to be. To be fair, it didn't matter that he hadn't known Marty. It was more important that he understood Marty. Wounded vets like Marty, where the real wounds were not to the body but to the spirit, could be found everywhere. They were at Camp Carson, at home in Queens, and most likely in every corner of America. The latest one to be added to the long list in Mike's heart was Mark Hinks, who was struggling with his demons alone in Long Beach. And while Mike's own combat experience had left him free of physical wounds, he did carry wounds of the other kind. This war, like each one before, had brought injury to those who were not in the fight, were not in a war zone, were not bombed, attacked, or broken. Like the lovely Kate, who demonstrated unwavering strength in the face of widowhood, and her young daughter, Allison, who despite having her father taken, was growing up true, fair, and loving. Passing a small park, Mike's thoughts turned to those who had somehow managed to emerge from the brutalities of war with their spirits completely intact, like Father Ted and Calvin Lafayette. Mike's face softened as he recalled an incident involving Father Ted and a litter of abandoned kittens. The memory of the priest, typically not a cat person, bringing the 8 tiny felines to Kate's diner, brought a smile to his face. He could still picture Father Ted's stoic expression as he offered the kittens to unsuspecting customers as part of the lunch special. His dry tone completely masking his amusement at the situation. Dan, not to be outdone, shared his own anecdote about Calvin Lafayette's resourcefulness during a chaotic evening at the diner when the dishwasher broke down, leaving a mountain of dirty dishes in its wake. Dan's eyes crinkled with mirth as he described how Calvin, unfazed by the panic in the kitchen, had calmly walked out into the diner and offered free apple pie to anyone willing to wash dishes for 15 minutes. Soon, the dishes were clean, and the pie display had to be restocked. Calvin had endeared himself to the customers, who readily took part in the impromptu dishwashing party. Their laughter filled the car, a short break from the heaviness of their earlier reflections. Mike's gaze drifted to the blur of buildings and trees as they passed. After a moment, he turned to Dan thoughtfully.
Then there's us.
Mike said, just audible above the purr of the engine.
How are we doing?
Dan's eyes remained on the streets of Santa Ana, but a small smile tugged at his lips.
Pretty good, I think.
His tone measured but warm. Approaching a red light, Dan turned to Mike, a mischievous glint in his eye. With a wink, he added,
I don't know about next week or next month, but today, the two of us are okay.
The light turned green, and Mike eased the car forward. Dan and Mike pulled up to Simon True's rambling ranch house, the late afternoon shadows making a pattern on the well-kept lawn. As they stepped out of the car, the air was ripe with the scent of freshly cut grass and the aroma of barbecue wafting from a neighboring yard. Dan flipped open the file he had been holding, his eyes scanning the pages. The information contained within seemed to paint a complex picture of their subject, one that raised more questions than it answered. Dan studied the file.
Now this looks like something.
He glanced up at Mike, who was waiting expectantly, before sharing his thoughts on the contents of the file. As Dan spoke, his words painted a picture of the remarkable Simon True. According to the documents, True may have been involved in a rather unconventional side business during his time in Rome. The file stated he had probably acted as a pimp for a bunch of Roman prostitutes, a detail that seemed both out of place and oddly fitting given the strange nature of the Roman occupation. Dan relayed the more salacious bits, his mind already working to connect these new details to their current case. Mike shook his head.
Yeah, I read that. While serving in the army.
The information left Mike conflicted, unsure whether such activities warranted months in the stockade or a certain level of respect for True's craftiness and entrepreneurial spirit. After several unanswered knocks, Dan and Mike exchanged a look. Without a word, they circled around to the back of the house, their footsteps following a new concrete walk. As they rounded the corner, they were greeted by an unexpected sight. There, lounging in a lawn chair with a beer in hand, sat Simon True. His right leg, encased in a cast running from his heel all the way up to his hip, was propped up on a makeshift ottoman fashioned from an overturned milk crate. Dan and Mike's eyes met, a silent conversation passing between them. They approached True, introducing themselves and explaining the purpose of their visit. The discussion was brief but pointed, with Mike taking the lead in questioning True about the age of the cast. True told them he had the cast for more than a month, effectively ruling him out as a suspect in the last 2 killings. Before departing, Mike made sure to get the name of the doctor who had applied the cast. He would verify later. Dan and Mike climbed into the car, their list of suspects now one name shorter, but their determination to solve the case unchanged. Chapter 20. Marty McDougal rolled to the front door, his muscular hands steady on the rims of his chair. As he opened the door, a comforting breeze carried in the scent of blooming jasmine from his neglected flower bed.
Hi, Uncle Marty.
Allie said cheerfully. She stood on the porch, a cardboard box balanced on her hip.
Mom sent some food. Want me to put this away?
Marty's face softened, his smile deepening as he took in the girl who had been a part of his life for so long.
Sure, kiddo. You thank your mom for me.
Allie bounced inside, her ponytail swinging, a slight limp betraying the lingering pain from her recent basketball injury. The aroma of Kate's meals escaped from the box, filling the air with the promise of good food wrapped with care. Marty's gaze shifted to Calvin Lafayette, who arrived with Allie, a large wooden toolbox in his hands. Marty shook his head in feigned disapproval.
You've brought tools?
Calvin's warm smile never wavered.
I'm here to work.
A mischievous glint appeared in Marty's eyes.
Come with me.
Marty wheeled his chair out the front door. Calvin followed, curiosity evident in his quick pace. Inside, Allie hurried about the kitchen, humming a tune as she unpacked the box. She opened cupboards in the refrigerator, finding homes for each dish her mother had prepared. Her movements were swift and sure, born from afternoons spent in this very kitchen. As she worked, Allie's eyes drifted to the living room. Faded photographs lined the mantel, capturing moments frozen in time. Her father's broad smile beamed out from several frames, often with his arms slung around Marty. The house seemed to breathe with memories, each corner holding whispers of laughter and friendship from when she was a little kid. Allie paused, holding a casserole dish, and closed her eyes. She could almost hear the echo of her father's deep laugh mingling with Marty's raspy chuckle. This house, with its creaky floorboards and faded curtains, held some of her most cherished memories of her dad. She smiled and continued her task of bringing order to Uncle Marty's kitchen. Through the window, Allie could see Uncle Marty wheel himself across the backyard, Calvin following close behind. They approached the enormous garage that dwarfed the house itself. Calvin's eyes widened in surprise. Marty fumbled with a set of keys, unlocked the door, and rolled inside. Silhouetted in the doorway, Marty reached for a row of switches. With a series of clicks, banks of overhead lights came to life, revealing a sight that stunned Calvin. A fully outfitted woodworking shop sprawled before them, neat and spotless, its sheer size taking his breath away. Racks of meticulously organized tools lined the walls, their metal surfaces reflecting the lights. Wood of all kinds, from rich mahogany to pale pine, sat either on rows of sturdy shelves against the back of the shop or was neatly tucked into the rafters above, filling the air with a pleasant, earthy scent. Two long workbenches, boasting an impressive array of power and hand tools, ran along the sides of the garage. Calvin's eyes jumped between the bandsaw, the lathe, and the gleaming table saw, each tool more impressive than the last. In the center, a large open space held several work tables, their surfaces scarred and stained from years of dedicated use. Calvin let out a whistle.
Jesus.
He set down his toolbox and began to explore, his fingers trailing reverently over the racks of tools. His eyes danced from one marvel to the next. He was like a kid in a candy store. Marty watched Calvin's reaction with a hint of pride.
Yeah, before the war, I spent most of my free time in here.
He wheeled to a shelf of tools and touched the blade of an ancient handsaw.
Some of this stuff was my grandfather's.
Calvin understood the importance of inherited craftsmanship, having also been raised by a grandfather skilled with his hands.
The rest I picked up. Used to make tables, bookcases, cabinets, that kind of thing. Made a dining room set for Kate and Bobby. Pretty nice, too. Had the chairs upholstered by a Mexican woman in Santa Ana.
Calvin was still taking in the wonders of Marty's shop. Marty pointed to a ramped platform in front of one of the workbenches.
Built that so I could work in this chair.
He shrugged.
Haven't done much.
Turning back to Calvin, Marty found himself enjoying the younger man's reaction. He tossed the keys to Calvin and headed for the door.
So you don't need to bring your own tools.
Calvin grinned.
I get that.
About an hour after she finished at Uncle Marty's, Allison Becker was riding her bike down Main Street. The Red Rock was a half block away when Allison began to coast. Her mother, Kate, her waitress uniform spotless, had walked from the diner. Allison's heart skipped a little as she approached the bar, a place she'd only ever seen from the outside. As Kate opened the door, Allison caught a fleeting glimpse of the dimly lit interior, a whiff of beer and cigarettes, and the exotic sounds of jazz from the jukebox. Moments later, Kate emerged with Cappy Gunnarsson, the proprietor of the Red Rock. The story, repeated with awe and affection by locals, was that Cappy had run a speakeasy during the days of Prohibition, when it was illegal to sell alcohol. His joint had been hidden in the back of an auto supply store. Entrance had been reserved for those who knew the right words to get in. The story said that he used to run boats in the dark to ships anchored outside the 3-mile limit, where U.S. law didn't apply, to get his illicit supplies. The more conservative elements of Redstone thought Cappy's backroom speakeasy was a pit of sin, and had steered clear. The ladies of Redstone would cross the street to avoid the town's bootlegger. When the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition late in 1933, Cappy saw an opportunity. With the savvy of a businessman and the charm of a born entertainer, he transformed his speakeasy into the Red Rock, a legitimate bar. Cappy was tall, with a shock of silver hair and piercing green eyes. His long face bore the lines of countless stories and a million smiles. His wiry frame made his exact age difficult to gauge, and his ever-present smile brightened a little more as he spotted Allison.
Allie, nice to see you.
Cappy said warmly,
Nice to see you too, Mr. Gunnarsson.
minding her manners.
My grandson said you played one heck of a game against Newport Beach.
Allison's cheeks flushed a little.
Thanks, Mr. Gunnarsson. We did have a good game.
Cappy grinned.
So, what brings you two by?
Kate turned serious.
It's about Marty.
A deep sigh escaped Cappy's lips, his jovial manner fading.
Known that boy all his life. I remember when he came here the first time. I'd only been open a while. He was barely legal.
He paused, displaying what seemed to both Allie and Kate a surprising amount of emotion.
It makes my heart ache, thinking about barring him.
Kate's eyebrows shot up, prompting Cappy to wave his hand dismissively.
I don't want his money. But if I did bar him, he'd just go somewhere else. Somewhere they don't know him. The best I can do is try to keep a lid on it.
He looked at Kate, seeking her approval.
He's getting worse.
We know.
Allison said, her voice plain, her young face filled with concern. Kate stepped forward, steady and determined.
The next time he gets bad, call me. We'll come and take him home. Don't call the police. Don't call Dan.
Cappy's eyes widened, surprised by the request.
You're sure? You're sure you want to do that?
As he studied their faces, he reminded himself the Beckers, as pretty as they looked, were not to be taken lightly. Still, he was compelled to warn them.
He gets pretty wild. He's hard to handle. And the things that come out of his mouth, whoo!
Uncle Marty is never that way with me.
Allison said with conviction.
Never.
Seeing Kate's expression, Cappy found the validation he sought. In that moment, he grasped just how deeply these women cared about Marty McDougal.
Day or night?
Cappy asked, his tone serious.
Day or night?
Cappy let out a long breath, shaking his head slightly.
All right, it's your funeral.
As the two women turned to leave, Cappy called out,
Hey, this is a good thing you're doing.
He opened the door to the Red Rock, a small smile beginning to form. Good people, he thought. Chapter 21. Dan sighed heavily as he entered his empty house, shrugging off his jacket and loosening his tie with a sharp tug. He rubbed his neck, feeling the knots that had settled in over a day fueled by coffee and stress. Even now, in the stillness of his own kitchen, his mind raced with questions and worries. Things he couldn't quite shake off. Dan pulled open the fridge, its cool glow brushing his face. Leftover chicken, vegetables. A pan hit the stove with a dull clang. These simple actions usually relaxed him. But tonight, as he chopped vegetables, his mind drifted back to his day. The interviews and the tension beneath them, the routine of preparing dinner, did provide some relief. As an officer in the Army, domestic chores were done for him. And while he ate many of his meals in Kate and Allison's apartment or at the diner, he had lived and eaten alone most of his life. As he finished slicing the vegetables, some of the day's stress began to ebb away, while he concentrated on his knife and the cutting board. He flipped the radio on.
And a gay round of activity it is. Take last Thursday evening, for example. The couple who lived next door to Mrs. Davis and me invited me over to their house right after dinner. They just wouldn't take no.
He was entertained by a comedy about a high school English teacher and her never-ending pursuit of the biology teacher. Dan's home filled with riotous laughter. As the comedy ended, Dan sat at the kitchen table, his fork scraping against the plate as he gathered bits of chicken, potatoes, and carrots. The radio droned on in the background, but his attention sharpened as the programming shifted to news about Korea.
Now we turn to the latest from South Korea.
He reached across the counter and turned up the volume.
Landing, much of the Korean peninsula is now back under the control of the democratic government of South Korea.
Dan chewed absently, his focus on the radio. He swallowed, then took another bite as the news continued.
U.S., United Nations, and Republic of Korean forces under the direction of General MacArthur,
said the announcer, his voice crackling through the speaker,
are pushing communist forces back to the 38th parallel.
He dropped his fork, the meal momentarily forgotten.
More UN forces will be landing in Korea in the next few weeks. Troops from Great Britain were the first to arrive.
The announcer's voice trailed off as Dan's mind raced ahead, considering what would come next in Korea. He finished his last few mouthfuls mechanically, hardly tasting the food. He pushed his empty plate away, leaning back in his chair. The cool beer in his palm felt good as he lifted it to his lips. Dan took a long swig.
Charlie, take that one.
Okay.
George,
you'll take nobody.
That's for you, copper.
Drop that gun.
Now, do you like that, Doug?
Holy. You dropped all three of them, Harry. All three of them.
After the news was an episode of Gangbusters. But Dan's thoughts were now far away, on the potential for an expanded war on the other side of the Pacific. Dan moved to the living room window, where the last traces of daylight were fading and the moon was beginning to rise, filling the sky with a tranquil yellow light. Against this peaceful view, the sounds of reenacted crime filled the room. Sirens wailed. The police dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker.
All cars in the vicinity of the West
Then the
Side
radio
Highway,
drama blared
south
sounds of
40th
screeching
Street.
tires and the rat-tat-tat of machine guns.
Hey, they're shooting back.
What'd you expect?
Get out of the way while you were coming
Dan's
through.
eyelids grew heavy. The beer bottle hung loosely in his fingers, threatening to slip from his grasp. His head nodded forward, then jerked back. The radio's showdown of police and mobsters became the scream of incoming artillery. Dan's arms tensed as the familiar weight of his M1 materialized in his hands. Through the fog of memory, he saw the jagged outline of Monte Cassino's monastery looming above, its ancient stones scarred by weeks of bombardment. Voices called out in the darkness.
Everybody get down! Incoming!
A flare burst over him, casting harsh shadows across the rocky terrain.
Sergeant Winters, take your squad and get behind that rock.
He sat motionless in his armchair, his eyes closed as the noise grew louder.
I'm hit! Medic!
Dan's muscles twitched, his body remembering a fear he hoped he'd left behind.
You three on the left, move it! Nelson, get the fuck down!
An explosion rocked his senses, followed by a cacophony of rifles and automatic weapons. The air filled with a terrifying symphony of war, explosions, bullets ricocheting off surfaces, and the relentless dissonance.
Does anybody know where
of
Charlie
gunfire.
Company is?
Dan's heart raced, his palms slick with sweat. A young, hysterical soldier pierced the envelope of combat noise.
The radio's out! I can't get anyone!
Another voice, raw with fear and desperation, cried out,
They're dead.
The words were punctuated by a deafening explosion that shook Dan, although he was years removed from combat. He flinched, his body reacting to the phantom threat, as if he were back on that blood-soaked battlefield in Italy. Then a jolt, cold beer spilling in his lap. Dan gasped, yanked back to the present. It was as if he'd been thrown a rope that he could use to pull himself away from the battle raging in his head. Startled, he jumped up, his heart racing.
Son of a bitch!
He cried as he looked down at the spreading stain. Dan began to clean up the spill, but stopped short when his right hand started to tremble uncontrollably. He straightened up, feeling dazed and disoriented. Seeking a connection to the present, he moved to the open window and looked out toward the ocean. Dan let out a long, shaky breath, trying to expel the lingering echoes of war that still haunted him. Dan forced himself through the steps, the ritual that had helped keep him steady, a ritual taught to him by Father Ted. 5 things, he thought. 5 things. His eyes scanned the space around him, seeking 5 objects to anchor his mind. 1, the armchair in the corner. 2, the brass table lamp. 3, the bay window. 4, the woven area rug. 5, the framed picture of the ocean hanging on the wall. Think on these and breathe. He completed the exercise by drawing slow, measured breaths. Then, after a minute, he was better. Chapter 22. As the black and white cruised through the dimly lit streets of their old stomping grounds, Detective Lloyd Rice and Patrolman Carl Archer exchanged knowing glances. The everyday sights and sounds of their youth surrounded them, a bittersweet reminder of how far they had come and how much the neighborhood had stayed the same. The air stank of grease and cigarettes, a scent lingering like an old bruise. Archer, his fingers drumming an absent-minded rhythm on the steering wheel, broke the silence.
You ready for this, Lloyd?
Rice considered the question as his eyes absorbed the people on the passing sidewalks.
Born ready. Besides, gotta get done.
Rice shifted in his seat, his old leather jacket squeaking against the patrol car's upholstery. This wasn't his first murder investigation, and it wouldn't be his last. But the brutality and cold calculation that went into each killing were like a punch in the face. Catching this killer mattered a lot to Lloyd Rice. Or maybe his unease was because they were back here, in the old neighborhood, where both of them had learned to throw a punch and run from trouble, before they'd learned to enforce the law. Through the windshield, Rice watched Mrs. Martinez's corner store scroll past, its neon "open" sign glowing just like it had 20 years ago. Some of their old crew still hung around these blocks, though most had either moved on or moved down, into graves or prison cells. The lucky ones, like Rice and Archer, had found their way out through badges and service. Tonight, that service meant hunting a shadow that preyed on women and then mutilated their bodies. Rice looked at his partner, grateful for his presence. They'd been through enough together that words weren't always necessary. It made the work easier to bear. Other teams were spread across the city tonight, but Rice knew they had the best chance here, where every crumbling brick and rusty fire escape told a story they knew by heart. The killer had made the streets of Los Angeles his hunting ground. But long before that, these streets had belonged to them. Their first stop was Pop's newsstand, a rickety wooden structure that had been there longer than most buildings on the street. As they approached, the sound of a crackling radio drifted toward them.
The rule, the unwritten rule, you know, is that the center fielder takes anything that he can get his glove on. And Snyder was there all right. Hermanski kept right on going. Gene, of course, has not had a chance to play left field all year. That's his first play out there. Maybe he was just too anxious.
Red Barber's southern cadence was giving the play-by-play of the day's Dodgers game. The old newsstand stood like a sentinel on the corner, its weathered boards creaking against each other in the evening breeze. Stacks of newspapers and magazines sat in racks and on shelves, their headlines screaming the latest on Korea, while also pitching local news to passers-by. The air around it smelled of fresh ink and tobacco, a scent that took Rice back to his childhood days when he'd sneak a peek at the scandalous covers of 10-cent pulp magazines when Pop wasn't looking. As they drew closer, the radio grew louder.
Toward, second base from first. Kind of takes a letter ball over for a call strike.
And Rice could now make out the crowd's roar in the background. Pop White, a wizened old man with more wrinkles than teeth, seemed to take no notice of the two officers. His roomy eyes were fixed on the small radio perched precariously on a stack of newspapers. In his hand was an old tin for his tobacco spittle. Some hung on his lip, and his shirt sleeve displayed the evidence of many wipes.
Evening, Pop.
Archer rested an elbow on the counter.
How's business?
Pop grunted, his attention never entirely leaving the radio.
Same as always.
You boys hear about the dead girl?
Then, as if to punctuate, he spit black goop into his tin. Rice pointed his index finger at the old man to let him know he was on the money.
That's right, Pop. Anything you can tell us?
Rice asked as he pulled out a small notebook. The old man shrugged, finally tearing his attention away from the radio to look at the officers.
Ain't heard much. But I can tell you the girls are afraid. They may not let you see it, but I can tell you for certain they're scared.
The two men from the LAPD took his assessment under advisement. Then, Pop turned to matters, more important, to him.
Say, do you think the Yankees are gonna take the series again? DiMaggio's still got it in him?
Archer chuckled, shaking his head.
I'm sure he does, Pop, but about the girl.
Pop waved a dismissive hand.
Terrible business. But I don't know nothing. Now, if you two gentlemen will excuse me, Robinson is on second and Hodges is up.
Connie and the old redhead been sitting here watching it for years. Of course, Desmond's an authority. He can tell you what a plane is just from looking at it one eye. Sample hits a high...
As they walked back to the car, Rice couldn't help but smile.
Well, at least he knows the Yankees are in first place.
Their next stop was a street corner where three working girls were huddled together, sharing a cigarette and swapping stories. As Rice and Archer walked up, the women's chatter died down, replaced by wary looks and defensive postures. One of the women, a blonde with too much makeup and not enough clothing, stepped forward.
Well, well, if it ain't Lloyd Rice. Seems to me we used to play cops and robbers when we weren't playing doctor.
She laughed at her own joke.
Now, after all this time, you still playing at it.
Rice recognized the woman and grinned from ear to ear.
Betsy? Betsy Miller? I'll be damned.
Betsy smirked, placing a hand on her hip.
In the flesh. What brings you to our neck of the woods, Detective? Feeling nostalgic for the old days? That trip to San Diego still on your mind?
She winked. Archer made a mental note to ask Lloyd about this trip to San Diego. Then Rice cleared his throat to get back to the reason for their stop.
We're here about the murders. Do any of you ladies know anything that might help?
The other two women shook their heads, but Betsy's eyes narrowed.
What's in it for us, if we do?
Rice sighed, running a hand through his hair.
Come on, Betsy. You know we're just trying to keep you girls safe.
Betsy scoffed, turning back to her cohorts.
Safe? Please. We can take care of ourselves. Always have, always will.
Pop White says all you girls are scared.
This comment brought an end to Betsy's sarcasm.
I love that old man, but he don't know shit.
As they walked away, Archer nudged Rice.
Old flame? What's this about San Diego?
Rice shook his head, a rueful smile on his face.
Well...
He started, then he thought better of it.
No, it's just a reminder of how different things could have been.
Their third stop took them to a dingy alley near the Brunswick Hotel, where two streetwalkers, looking bored and tired, were standing by a brick wall. As Rice and Archer approached, they noticed a third figure, an imposing woman, tall, smartly dressed, with graying hair and a concerned look on her face, holding a handful of leaflets. She looked like a middle-aged social worker or a missionary trying to do good. The woman turned to face them, her expression changing as Archer stepped into the light and his occupation became clear. She handed each of them a leaflet. Her eyes, sharp and alert, despite the hour, scanned them from head to toe.
Officers,
She said with a hint of a Midwest accent.
I hope you're not here to cause trouble for these ladies. They get enough of that every day.
Archer held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture, his face the picture of innocence.
Not at all, ma'am. We're just asking some questions about a recent murder. Mind if we have a word with your friends here?
The woman acquiesced, but kept a watchful eye on the officers as Rice spoke to the two working girls. Archer looked at the leaflet the gray-haired woman had given him. Dramatic warnings about syphilis and gonorrhea, complete with graphic illustrations that made his stomach lurch. As they finished their brief and unproductive conversation with the working girls, the older woman approached them again.
Officers,
She said, thrusting a handful of condoms at them.
when you talk to other girls, I'd appreciate it if you could give them some of these.
Rice and Archer exchanged confused looks as they accepted the unexpected offering. Walking back to their car, Archer chuckled and said,
Well, that's a first. Think Thacker will want us to share?
He opened his fist to reveal about a dozen condoms. Their final stop of the evening was a parking lot next to a Gulf gas station. The lot was mostly empty, save for a few beat-up cars and a solitary figure under a streetlight. As they walked toward her, they could see the woman's face. It spoke of years of hard living.
Evening.
Archer called out as they neared.
Mind if we ask you a few questions?
The woman eyed them warily before answering.
Name's Millie. What you want to know?
The cop in Rice took over, and he waited for more from Millie.
Richard. Millie Richard.
Using a French pronunciation. Rice pulled out his notebook once again.
We're looking into the recent murders. Did you know any of the victims?
Millie's face softened slightly.
Yeah, I knew Susie Duke. Sweet girl. Didn't deserve what happened to her.
Archer offered her a look of sympathy, much to Millie's surprise.
Anything you can tell us about her? Any regulars, maybe someone who stood out? Like to play rough?
Millie was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant as if lost in thought. Then she recalled something.
Yeah, there was this one guy. Susie said he had lots of money. Always paid well. Might have been a lawyer or some businessman. Had to pay well. Saw some of her bruises.
Rice took notes.
Anything else you can remember about him? What he looked like, maybe? Or a name?
Nah. Susie didn't say too much about her regulars. Just said this one was loaded and treated her nice.
When he wasn't roughing her up.
Millie had to concede the point and then added,
I miss Susie.
Knowing that the two cops probably couldn't care less. Rice mulled over Millie's words as they walked back to the car. A rich lawyer as a suspect? It wasn't entirely implausible, but something about it didn't sit right with him. His mind immediately went to Paul Ringer. He was one of the city's most prominent and wealthy attorneys, and they'd already had him in for questioning. Kelly and Fiorante were convinced he beat his wife. Ringer was a pompous ass, no doubt, but a murderer? Highly unlikely. Besides, a man with his money could afford a much classier type of companion than streetwalkers like Susie Duke and Millie Richard. Los Angeles was loaded with rich lawyers, many of whom likely indulged in the city's seedier pleasures. Pinning the murders on any of the city's well-heeled citizens would be a tall order. Settling into the driver's seat, Archer turned to Rice.
Well, partner, what do you think? Worth the trip down memory lane?
Rice was reviewing his notes.
Might be. At least we've got something to work with now. Plus, we've got enough condoms to last us months.
Archer laughed as he started the engine.
Once. Speak for yourself.
The two cops drove off into the night, leaving behind the faint hope of justice for the murdered women. As they turned onto a busy artery, the neon signs of bars and clubs danced, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across their faces. The night was still young, and the streets were just beginning to heat up. Rice and Archer knew that somewhere out there a killer was walking free and, in all probability, looking for another victim. Archer glanced at Rice, a half smile playing on his lips.
You know, Lloyd, sometimes I wonder if we ever really left this place.
The patrol car disappeared around a corner, consumed by the night. But Lloyd Rice and Carl Archer would be back tomorrow and the day after that, until they brought a measure of justice to their old neighborhood. Chapter 23, Day 4. Nancy Sanchez usually walked with a confidence born of experience. Most of the time, her hips swayed with a practiced allure that drew looks from every man, old enough to shave. But this morning, her feet hurt. As dawn broke, the cumulative effect of spending hours in her new heels caught up to her. As she got off the streetcar to walk to her apartment, her feet ached with each step. Nancy hobbled along the street. It was deserted except for the odd early riser hurrying to work. She sighed, her hand instinctively moving to count the slim earnings in her purse. 2 tricks, hardly worth the effort. Wincing, she bent down to remove her high heels. The cool pavement offered small relief to her sore feet as she walked barefoot along the sidewalk. A block from her apartment, Nancy spotted a milkman loading empty bottles into his truck. As she passed him, his eyes darted up, a lecherous grin spreading across his face.
"Hey, sweet cheeks.
He called out, licking his lips.
Ain't you a sight for sore eyes? Want me to leave some cream for ya?"
Nancy's jaw clenched, her tired mind searching for a biting retort. She stopped, turning to face him fully. She saw a middle-aged, pot-bellied man in a white uniform and cap. Nancy couldn't decide if he looked more sad or more ridiculous. For a moment, she opened her mouth, ready to unleash a verbal tirade. But exhaustion won out. Her posture slumped, and she shook her head.
"You ain't worth the spit."
She spun on her heel and continued toward her apartment, leaving the grinning milkman behind. Nancy shuffled into her small home, tossing her shoes to one side. The sight of her apartment, with its meticulously arranged furniture and spotless surfaces, was a small oasis of order in her disorganized life. It made her feel better. The neatly folded throw blanket on the armchair and the perfectly aligned stack of magazines on the coffee table seemed to tease the disheveled state of her appearance and the ache in her feet. For a moment, she stood motionless, allowing the calm of her surroundings to seep into her weary bones. She headed straight for the bathroom, eager to wash away the grime of the streets. Emerging refreshed in her housecoat, Nancy caught sight of an envelope on the floor by the door. She bent to retrieve it, noting its blank exterior and unsealed flap. From a high cupboard in the kitchen, she pulled a jar stuffed with bills, her life savings. Adding the night's meager earnings, she settled at the table and opened the envelope. A crisp $10 bill fluttered out, bringing a smile to her tired face.
"Well, hello, Alexander Hamilton."
Nancy lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply before reading aloud.
"Nancy, I really enjoyed the last time I saw you. You are my kind of girl.
She rolled her eyes and mocked.
I'll bet.
Nancy was irked. How'd he know where she lived? She never took John's home. But when offered, she readily accepted rides home at the end of the night. Beat the hell out of streetcars. She might have to change that. Continuing, she read,
I'm in town and want to see you. Come to the Ocean View Motel tonight at 8.
Nancy skimmed ahead.
Key under the mat. I'll have another 20 for you.
Her eyes wide at the mention of more money.
Bob, from San Francisco.
She finished reading, leaning back in her chair. Nancy scrunched her face as she tried to place this Bob. A vague recollection surfaced, but nothing solid. She took another drag of her cigarette, considering the offer.
Well, Bob from San Francisco, for $30, I'll be any kind of girl you want.
Nancy sat in her kitchen, contemplating a hot date with a well-paying man that she could barely remember.